It's the NFL Draft Eve where lots of young men in franchises will forever be changed throughout the course of this weekend. And here to break it all down with us, giving us her top 5 American prospects in this draft class is SI's Crissy Froyd, who covers the SEC, the American, and of course the NFL Draft. Crissy, we've got your top 5 list. Some are obvious. We'll of course be talking about Tyjae Spears, Dell from Houston. But of your top 5 guys, who was that first guy out, the guy on the fringe that couldn't quite make your list?
I would say it comes down to Clayton Tune and Nick Anderson. And honestly, whenever you're doing these rankings, you have to kind of combine what the predictions are as far as where the NFL is going to lean, what the scouts are thinking, and where you're coming from at the same time. Like, I would have probably put Nick Anderson in my top 5, but I also know just how much he's being knocked for his frame right now, which I don't think has really caused him that many issues, but they kind of wonder how he's going to be kind of in the open range, that kind of stuff. And so I think this is a player that really, if he was 2 or 3 inches taller, would be being talked about in a much different manner and really just brings everything you want from an intangibles perspective as well. But I think he's more of a priority undrafted free agent signing. And then when we look at Clayton Tune, this is a guy that I viewed as potentially an early round quarterback prospect ahead of the season. But I think it comes down to the fact that he and Houston just didn't quite meet the expectations. So we talk about Clayton Tune and how he has this athletic element to his game that I didn't think really showed through this season. And I think that when it comes down to who he is and where his ceiling is, we see a good game manager who can execute a game plan really well, who has come in the clutch for Houston several times when they've needed it. But I think that he just overall lacks an it factor. He's got kind of that air raid run and shoot stigma running against him a little bit. So I think it's going to be curious to see kind of how he can slide into a backup role and maybe develop and get a little bit better from a footwork perspective and things like that.
Let's stay in the great state of Texas for your 5th prospect here in the American. From Houston to SMU, Rasheed Rice. SMU has had quite the lineage of wide receivers over the years, whether it's James Prochet, Emmanuel Sanders, and Reggie Robertson, Danny Gray. And Rasheed Rice is poised to be the next great guy here in the NFL. What is it that you see with him that he makes your list?
I think that his highs are really high, and I think that that's what has caught people's attention. I mean, there's a reason why people are talking about this as the best receiver in the conference ahead of the season and possibly one of the best receivers in college football. I think he's got some impressive ball skills. He's a good ball tracker, and he can be a vertical threat at times too. But I think that what it comes down to is, can he do this game in and game out? I think that sometimes he lacks physicality and some of the contested catches, some things like that. So I think that if he can just become a bit more consistent, that he can develop as someone who's going to probably go into more of a developmental backup role in the beginning and then can get better and maybe slide into something once he hits his ceiling and can kind of stay where his ceiling is.
He's certainly consistent as a competitor. Week 4 against TCU, injures his toe, plays the rest of the season. Really excited to see where he ends up at the next level. And transitioning now to your number 4 guy. Defense wins championships, and we saw that with Tulane this year. Dorian Williams, linebacker for the Green Wave, certainly big part in their transition going from 2-10 to 12-2. Why is he a next level guy? What do you see in him, and why should NFL teams be really excited about Williams?
Yeah, well, Tulane had the number 1 passing defense in the entire nation, a really big thing for several weeks heading into just the top half of this season. And they did kind of get up and down a little bit toward the back half where that particular aspect is concerned. But that comes down to pass rush and just pure aggression. And that's what Dorian Williams embodies to me. So I think that he's shown that in this conference, then going up and bottling up some of these other prospects like Deuce Vaughn, who have been really highly touted and really hard to stop. So I think that he brings a really good mentality to the NFL. I think he's probably going to be a day 3 guy, but as someone who could potentially be a steal.
You've got Tyler Scott for Cincinnati, a true junior coming out of this year. And, what is it that he'll really bring to an NFL team's passing attack? He went a little bit under the radar in 2021, being overshadowed in that CFP year for the Bearcats, but really a big season last year, 4+ 100-yard games. How does he translate to the next level?
I think the first thing you think of is speed. I mean, this is a junior Olympic sprinter, so I think that he can get away from anybody. And I've seen some comparisons to T.Y. Hilton, obviously very successful receiver for the Colts, and I think that comes down to just the level of versatility that he brings. He's a really good route runner, and I think that whenever we look at him, he does everything really well. He's good at all three levels of the field, and it just is going to come down to improving some fundamentals, some footwork on routes and things like that. But I think in terms of raw talent and just special talent to build on, this is a player to definitely watch that's going to do really well in the NFL.
Let's stay with wideouts for your number 2 pick. One of the things that I've heard about Nathaniel Tank Dell for Houston, he's one of the most electrifying prospects, one of the most electric wide receivers in this entire draft class. What is it that you really see in him, and why is his game going to translate really at the next level?
Yeah, I was at the Senior Bowl, and the people that I was staying with could not shut up about Tank Dell. I think I heard about Tank Dell every single day that I was in Mobile. And I think it just comes down to just how good of an athlete he is. I mean, this is somebody who gets a lot of bursts and someone who runs their routes well, a very nuanced player. And I think that what we think about when we think about Tank Dell is he's another one of those players, like some of the other guys in this conference, that have been just kind of knocked for their frame. But I think the way that he extends beyond that, the way he's still able to be physical and just kind of puts that aside from him, I think that that's what makes him so good. And I think that it is honestly just something that hasn't gotten his way whatsoever.
You mentioned the Senior Bowl, and finally at number 1, running back Tyjae Spears. No one lit it up quite like him at the Senior Bowl. If you didn't know who he was before then, you certainly did that week. But we saw him firsthand at the Cotton Bowl, lighting it up against the Heisman winners. Certainly, MVP. They win the American Championship. So much excitement. But why should NFL teams be really buying into Spears and what he's going to bring at the next level?
I honestly wish that everyone had a chance to meet Tyjae Spears, because he's probably the best human on the planet I've ever come in contact with. And his teammates, whenever you go ask people who their favorite player is, they almost cut you off and tell you Tyjae Spears, because that's how much they like being around him. And I think the biggest thing about Tyjae Spears is people didn't realize how versatile he was. This is an elusive player that I think really came to light just how much of a threat he could also be out of the backfield, and all these ways he could be used and just in Mobile that people didn't realize before. I think that's why his stock went up. But I think that this is a player who really just makes an offense multi-dimensional, because you think about how Breece Hall and Brock Purdy were at Iowa State. And whenever I talked to Brock Purdy, we kind of talked about how much Breece Hall, and not in a bad way, kind of limited what he was able to put up on tape. But then for Tulane, me and Michael Pratt had this conversation not long ago, and I say, Tyjae Spears is obviously a really good player, a huge asset to this team, but do you ever look back and think about how, well, maybe if we had leaned more in the passing attack and he wasn't on this offense, would Michael's numbers have been better? And he said no. He said just the way that the run is opening up the pass, and the things that Tyjae Spears is able to do makes this offense better, and ultimately makes me better and makes things easier on me. And so I think that that's something that's going to just transition over to the next level in a big way.
What's his ceiling? Where do you see him getting picked here in this NFL draft?
I think he deserves to be a day 1 pick. He reminds me a lot of Alvin Kamara, and I really don't think there's anything that he can't do. And the only reason why people are skeptical is because of the ACL. But I think that he's a day 2 pick. He deserves to go in round 1, honestly.
Well, time will tell, and we can't wait to see where all of these prospects and the rest of our American guys end up. It's always fun this time of year when we have guys and new NFL teams to really cheer on in the fall. Crissy, appreciate your insight and really looking forward to seeing your coverage here throughout the weekend. Thanks so much.